Okay, so welcome back. We're over in the lightning talk area. I have Andrew Randall with me, who might have a better outfit.
I don't know about that, Mark.
Wait, have you also decorated your entire room?
I have decorated my entire room in an Alice in Wonderland theme. Yes.
So
Was that not in the instructions?
no, the instructions were to go big, and you've gone bigger. Just before we get started, I'd like to give a shout out to all of our sponsors. Andy works at Kinvolk, which is one of them. Packet is a sponsor. Container Solutions, Rancher, and OfferZen came in at Queen at Hearts and Cheshire Cat level. The CNCF, Honeycomb, Aqua Security, Kinvolk, Giant Swarm, and Cloud Bees are all supporting us as well. You can go to the sponsor section in the Brella app and either chat with them live or set up a meeting with them if you'd like to talk to them. I know Container Solutions have got books to give away, as do Aqua. I'm not quite sure what Kinvolk's got, but we'll come to that in a moment. Packet will give you free bare metal servers if you give us a convincing reason to do so. And I'm sure Rancher and the rest of them have got great things going on in there as well. Back to the scheduled programming. I got to see a sneak peek of Andy's CFP, and it was written in the form of a poem. And I feel like we don't have time for it now, but we're definitely going to, with your permission, publish it later because it's probably the best CFP I've ever seen.
Well, that's high praise, and of course you can. Yeah, love to.
Excellent. Okay, well then, the only thing that's left for me to do is to play you some fake applause and clap you in. Take it away, Andy.
Well, thank you, Mark. And I'm just going to share some slides in here. So, yeah, give me a shout if they don't appear. Are you seeing the slides?
Yes, we are.
So, yeah, as Mark said, the proposal for this talk was a nonsense poem. So you must all be completely mad to be attending it. And not just that, but in a conference themed after Alice in Wonderland. So as you can hopefully tell from my dress, I am the March Hare today. Or I can also, if you prefer, be the March Hairless. Either way, I shall be your guide as we go on a journey through the looking glass today with CoreOS. So the good news is my talk is only 15 minutes long. So I better get started before I find I've already finished. Oh dear, is that the time already? I'm late already. I'm going to get on with this. So a long time ago, before Kubernetes was born, and I know for many of you that's hard to imagine, but please engage your imagination as we go through this story. The internet was an insecure place run on software that was full of security holes, or rabbit holes, or both. Worse, even when those holes have been fixed, many servers have not actually been patched. So it's what you might call a black hatter's tea party, where attackers would scan ports, find unpatched operating systems, escalate privileges, and assume control of those servers for nefarious purposes. So at this point in our story, we encounter two friends, Tweedlepolvy and Tweedle Phillips, whom, for the purposes of our narrative, we shall call Alex and Brandon, say. And they were mulling this problem. We should really secure the internet, mused Brandon. I know, let's form a company to do that, said Alex. And thus was CoreOS formed in the town of St. Francis. Now, Alex wore a hat that said CEO for Curious Executive Officer, and Brandon wore one that said CTO for Curious Technical Officer. Curiouser and curiouser indeed. And as big, hairy, audacious goals go, securing the internet was the biggest, the hairiest, and the audaciousest. But Alex and Brandon were clever, and they had an idea. As this problem was too big to solve in one go, following the king's advice, they began at the beginning, breaking it down into a small number of principles. The first principle derives from logic, as Lewis Carroll would approve. Software that is never installed cannot be attacked. And with applications being packaged as containers, a base operating system didn't need as much included in it. So it just made sense to remove everything that's not necessary, making those pesky black hatters' lives much harder. Second, also following logic, if we don't allow the operating system itself to be modified, then a whole class of vulnerabilities that attack by modifying the OS can be avoided. Third, rather than error-prone updates via piecemeal package management, operating system updates should be completely atomic, downloaded into a separate partition and activated on reboot. They should also be automatic, meaning updates and security patches are discovered, downloaded, and applied on a server just as easily as they are on your smartphone. Ace. And this approach is then combined with a principle of least privilege, which means you must explicitly grant access where it's needed, otherwise you can't do jack. And finally, they realized that when running containers, not just the OS, but also the container runtime itself must be secure. Now remember, back then, Docker, which was the king of containers, had some pretty big security holes as well. So for inspiration, in implementing this, they looked to the largest and best defended castle in Wonderland. And benevolent King Google had shown how these principles could be applied to create not just a secure computing environment, but one that also resulted in robustness and reliability at scale. Now, not being born with Lewis Carroll's gift of catchy naming, Tweedlepolvy called this approach Giphy, or Google's infrastructure for everyone else. Over time, following these principles and guided by their mission of securing the internet, Alex and Brandon, by this time joined by a handful of other merry CoreOs, some of them with long beards, built an entire stack for deploying applications. Foundation of this Giphy stack was the CoreOS container Linux operating system. This self-updating minimal distro became wildly popular among the enthusiastic early adopters of container technologies for the ease with which they could manage a whole fleet of machines at scale, kind of as cattle, not pets. Working together with a team of Linux nerds in Berlin, Germany called Kinvolk, they also built a secure container runtime called Rocket, which was included in the OS. And then they built a distributed key value store, etcd, with an enabled shared state across the cluster, while cluster-wide orchestration of containers came a little bit later with Tectonic Kubernetes distro. And I don't want to get distracted by a discussion of the origins of Kubernetes or predecessor CoreOS Project Fleet, because that's too long and amply covered in other talks. Suffice it to say that while CoreOS didn't invent Kubernetes, the efforts of many CoreOs were instrumental in making it successful, including invention of things like the operator concept. And then last but not least, Claire and Quay added container registry and scanning, which was essential to an end-to-end security posture. So at this point, the CoreOs looked at this stack that they built and felt that they, like Alice, were in Wonderland. Really impressive to have achieved this over a very short period of time. But inevitably, as a chapter in a book must come to an end, so must a Silicon Valley startup at some point reach the looking glass at the end of the runway. And as they glazed in that looking glass, they saw a man wearing a red fedora looking back at them. This was their destiny, they knew, and through the mirror they stepped, and CoreOS dissolved into Red Hat, the grin of the Cheshire Cat's face disappearing last of all. Now, fast forward 2 years, and what's become of that technology stack that they built? Firstly, Red Hat quickly declared, off with its head, to CoreOS Container Linux. Its life officially comes to an end on May 26th, 2020. And yep, if my pocket watch is correct, that's next week. So if you're running CoreOS today, you have just 6 days to sort out a migration plan, unless you want to end up like Humpty Dumpty on an insecure platform. Rocket, well, that has served its purpose of opening up the container runtime specification. It drove the creation of the Open Container Initiative, and it resulted in Docker breaking apart Containerd, which really kind of became the preferred container runtime. And so Rocket was retired after a little while. etcd continues very actively. It was donated to the CNCF by Red Hat. And it really is, for those who don't know, it is the core piece of technology at the heart of Kubernetes that enables it to synchronize state across a distributed system, which is pretty much key to everything that Kubernetes does. Tectonic itself, the Kubernetes distro, was retired, but many of those technologies were merged into OpenShift 4. And Quay, together with Claire, continues to be an active Red Hat service, widely used by the community, and with a degree of reliance that was highlighted by the impact of a major outage over the last couple of days. Hug ops to the Red Hat folks, and earns a little asterisk here. But the team at Kinvolk, and if you're paying attention, you'll remember that they were the engineering team that worked with CoreOS to develop Rocket in the early days, looked at this state of affairs, and they thought there should be some future for these end-of-life technologies, starting with CoreOS Container Linux. As the poem tells, and this is part of my CFP, 1-2, 1-2, with wicked git foo, the Kinvolk team went snicker-snack. Container Linux built anew, Flatcar galumphing back. A quick fork and build later, and Flatcar Container Linux was born. And today, Flatcar is a seamless replacement for CoreOS Container Linux. And a team of experts, including the original Kinvolk team, but also additional engineers who've joined more recently from companies like AWS and Google and Red Hat, is building and maintaining releases independently of upstream CoreOS now, updating components, adding new features based on a public roadmap. And to the existing channels of alpha, beta, and stable releases, we've added an experimental edge channel for new capabilities, such as the latest kernel, WireGuard, and Secrets v2. And all of this can be done with a completely seamless in-place upgrade for CoreOS if you're running that today. We've introduced an open source update server, which replaces the core update capability of CoreOS, which allows fleet-wide update policies to be controlled. And we've got 24/7 enterprise support infrastructure in place. And there are just a lot of people out there in the community already adopting Flatcar Linux today, as well as a lot of strategic partnerships we're building with folks such as Microsoft and VMware and Packet and all these other folks. So the story of Container Linux, CoreOS Container Linux, continues with Flatcar. Let's see what happens to Alice as she looks for the legacy of CoreOS Tectonic. So Alice's eyes at this point fell on a little box that was poking out from behind the curtain. On it, in spidery writing, she read the words, "Open me," and on the side, a strangely spelled word, "locomotive." "Well, I'll open it," said Alice, "and see what's inside." Alice was pleased to find that while Tectonic itself was not all open source, one of the CoreOS had established a fully open source derivative called Typhoon. The team at Kinvolk started with an extended Typhoon to build a fully self-hosted, easily updated Kubernetes distro inspired by Tectonic. And this had two key goals. First, to provide an easy-to-use experience as close as possible to a managed Kubernetes service, and the second, to make it fully secure out of the box. So we do this with a command line tool. locusctl takes a simple cluster and component config and installs the infrastructure, the Kubernetes cluster, key components like networking, storage, and monitoring. On AWS, AKS, Packet, and more environments in the future. And we're also building our own modern dashboard, an open source project called Headlamp, which is out there in a very early release right now, and encourage folks to try this out. Now, it's all very well to say, drink me on a bottle, but the wise little Alice was not going to do that in a hurry. "No, I'll look first," she said, "and see whether it's marked poison or not. And similarly, before you drink from the bottle marked Flatcar or open the box marked Locomotive, you can download and try them out first at these locations here." And here, my new friends, our story really does come to an end. I hope the tale of CoreOS through the looking glass kept you entertained. I cannot tell you which way to go from here because, as a wise cat once said, that depends a good deal on where you want to get to. But if a Mad Hatter's tea party with open source sandwiches, Kubernetes cakes, and Flatcar flapjack sounds fun, then come and join us at Kinvolk on our mission to build and promote an enterprise-grade, 100% open source application stack. Thank you.
The presentation leaves nothing to be desired. Absolutely flabbergasted.
I don't get an applause though.
Jabberwocky.
Everyone else got an applause at the end of their talk.
So here's why you're not getting an applause, and this is because my Uber Eats driver is about to arrive, and I need to take you and the laptop to the door, and I'm dressed like this. So
Awesome.
it would be fun for everyone to see the reaction live.
Well,
but,
I hope you're giving him a big tip.
I'm definitely going to give a big tip. But since they haven't rung the doorbell yet, let me play the applause.
Thank you very much.
Really
Thank you for having me today. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and if you want to speak to Kinvolk, go and grab them in the sponsor chat over there. You can either book a meeting with them or you can have a live chat.
Absolutely.
We're going to go back to track 1 now for the rest of the talks. But Andrew, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, my friend. See you later.
Bye-bye. Bye.